So thank you again all for joining. I want to thank Michael so much for hosting and being here and helping to send out the reminders and the links. So helpful. And thank you all for joining. So I just want to check in about a little bit of how the last 2 weeks went regarding some exercises we have that I will refresh you some things because I know not everybody was here. And one thing I just want to check, if I can, the buddy system. Would anybody like to say, does anybody need an adjustment of the buddy system? And this is what this is for those of you that don't know. We started, I started this a long time ago with another center where we have trouble getting to the cushion and trouble doing the practices and the exercises. So I split people off into buddies, like two people, just randomly, and you could exchange phone numbers and emails or however you choose to okay, I love my buddy. There's Sarah, thank you. And how you choose to connect, it's up to you, and how often, it's completely between the two of you. So some of these people are still going and they found it really helpful. So they not only formed a Dharma relationship, which can happen also in Zoom, but they found that like days they didn't want to practice and they were feeling really down on themselves. And the buddy sent them a text, just a standard thing of, I just finished my meditation, or I had a struggle this morning, and it just things that would move them to practice. So I just wondered, Sarah and Priscilla seem to be doing well. Does anybody need an adjustment, or they're not in touch with their buddy, or any other things they would like to improve about that? Or so I just thought I'd check in. Anybody else want to? Because I know some of you had buddies. Have you been in touch with your buddies? Joanna's, yep, okay.
Mine is on vacation right now, or not on vacation, visiting family. So we
Yeah,
haven't communicated, but we did before she left, and it's been fine.
yeah, no problem. That's great. John, I don't know. I remember you tagged on with somebody. How's it going?
I
Sorry, I'm
haven't
picking on you.
it's okay. I haven't contacted them. I
You
don't
haven't
remember who
contacted
did
them?
it. No, I forgot. I had it in my phone. I lost it.
Okay. I'm not sure if your buddy's here, but we could check on. I know Peggy had a buddy. I wasn't sure if you guys have been in touch, or if somebody wants a buddy, we can start that at any time. So if you're kind of like, I'd like to be part of that, or is there anybody here that wants to join like that? And John, I'm so sorry, I don't know who your buddy was. So you could get another buddy, or you could try to look for that and see if it's helpful for you. It does take a little effort. Like somebody needs to start, and somebody, but it for some people it works pretty well. And it's okay to change too. If you feel like, my buddy's too busy, that's okay. We can certainly hook in. So anyway, I'll just leave that for you guys if you want to let me know in the future or to get involved. It can be really helpful. Or if you didn't participate before and you go kind of, I think I want a buddy at this point, we can always do that. So I just thought I'd mention that. Okay, and another thing we were doing, Michael was so kind to send this exercise out. So I mentioned seeing everything as a product, seeing everything as a product. So again, we did a meditation on emptiness, and wait, let me find the exact. Yeah. And we were talking about, we've been going through the Noble Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. So we started off with the part that deals with, of the three higher trainings, that's how they're divided up. But we started talking about having good morality and ethics. And we were working with speech, and we were working with things like that. But I've jumped ahead into the third higher training of wisdom, because I think it's really valuable right now to address some of these world issues that we were talking about with wisdom. Okay? So let me refresh you. What was sent out is looking at the Noble Eightfold Path. And again, we were dealing with ethical conduct, and then you have concentration, they're divided up there, and wisdom. Okay, wisdom has two of the Noble Eightfold Path. This Noble Eightfold Path basically what the Buddha taught after he got enlightened. Like, here's how to conduct yourself. It's pretty simple. And so some of them relate to having kind of ethical clarity, because from that you can build a practice. Your mind's less disturbed if you're doing the right thing. Okay, so it talks about what right things do you need to do. Then you move into concentration. Well, I need to actually have a pretty subdued consciousness, okay, in order to transcend and transform subtle and gross obscurations in my mind to become a Buddha. Okay, so then there's a whole teaching on that, and that goes through quite a lot of our philosophy. And then you come to wisdom, and you need actually the subdued mind in a very high level of meditative absorption, what we call samadhi in Sanskrit. Samadhi, this meditative absorption at a high level. If you're dealing with calm abiding or shine is a Tibetan word for calm abiding, and there's 9 stages of that to attain shine or calm abiding. And then the only reason you want to get the calm abiding is not just to have a blissful, concentrated mind. That's not the end all here in this tradition. Okay, it's to apply that mind in meditation to the wisdom realizing emptiness, like the meditation we did 2 weeks ago of what's called the 4-part analysis I'm going to review. Okay, and what we do is in meditating on the nature of reality by analyzing how we exist, right, and realizing we don't exist the way we seem to exist, okay, which keeps us stuck in suffering. Okay, then I'm applying that meditative mind in to get a direct perception of emptiness. Okay, this is how important it is, emptiness, okay, which simply means a lack of inherent nature. A lack of inherent nature. Yourself and everything that exists has a lack of inherent nature, has an absence of that. But that's not the way we engage with our reality or ourselves. We feel like there's an independent nature, which again causes me to then say, my cup, and if you harm this cup, I'm going to be really upset. Okay, now cup is mundane again. Okay, but if you harm me, if you harm my family, if you harm my dogs or my cat, I'm going to be really upset. I don't understand there's an interdependent nature that is also related to my karma, meaning the imprints made in my consciousness with my body, speech, and mind. There's a very intricate relationship also between karma and emptiness, okay? But there's an interrelational experience between all of us and all of our stuff. And that's not what we impute on things. We impute a heavy, concrete, independent existence, okay? That's how we go through space, and that's what we impute on all of our stuff. That's the cause of our suffering. So let's poke at this a little bit more. So we started looking at the 2 of the Noble Eightfold Path that deal with this, which are right thought and right understanding. And again, the Buddha gave 84,000 different discourses. The main point, all of them, was to get us to have a realization of emptiness. That's how important it is. Okay, even though the teachings seem to exist on a different level, they seem to be teachings for Theravadan students that just talked about liberation, a kind of temporary ending your suffering. It's not temporary, but ending your suffering, but only gross suffering. Okay, and then so there were many different teachings based on the different levels of disciples. Let's look once again, review right thought and right understanding. Right thought, okay, denotes the thoughts of selfless renunciation or detachment. We talked about this a bit last week. Thoughts of love and thoughts of nonviolence, which are extended to all beings. That's considered right thought. Okay, so again, a selfless renunciation being I'm giving up. What are we giving up? Suffering. What are you really giving up is suffering. You're not giving up your house and your belongings and your money. It's real renunciation is giving up suffering. Giving up suffering. It's kind of the beginning in some ways where the path to enlightenment begins, I think, when you really get renunciation. And they say literally it's when you strive day and night to get out of samsara. Okay. But through this, when it says detachment, so we don't often like that word. We kind of prefer attachment. Now, we don't like attachment because it causes us suffering. Okay, but we think a detachment is somebody cold and doesn't care about anything. Not this kind of detachment. Okay, this is kind of like I see a friend I've had all my life. I might have a little bit more attachment to him or her because I've had a long history with them and I feel safe with them and there's a trust, as opposed to someone new like that. But you'd see all these beings in the same light because why? Because of loving thoughts of nonviolence towards them. Yeah. So that way I have an equal regard for all of them and equanimity can grow. So a healthier thing rather than these are the people I will help and like, and these are the people I'm not really interested. Not going to do as much. Okay. So we want to kind of come, this is kind of right thought. And then, and here it says thoughts of selfless attachment, love, nonviolence, are here grouped on the side of wisdom. Okay. So it shows that true wisdom again is endowed with these noble qualities. Okay. All thoughts of selfish desire, ill will, hatred, violence are basically a lack of wisdom, like that. So that's first, right thought. That's one of the noble eightfold path is right thought. This is the next one, right understanding. What's the difference? Right understanding is an understanding really about emptiness as things as they are. So it's much more specifically about emptiness. Okay. An understanding this is the highest wisdom which sees ultimate reality. It sees emptiness. Emptiness is ultimate reality, the lack of inherent nature. According to Buddhism, there's two sorts of understanding. Okay, one of them is what I call knowledge, intelligence. That's a type of understanding that you need to get emptiness. You need to first intellectually understand what we're talking about. So you have a general grasp of the philosophy. Okay, you have a grasp of some of the subjects. You're given information, data, I'll call it. Okay, and you understand that. That's great, but it's not necessarily the deepest where you're merged together with it, as if your mind's absorbed into it. When you have a realization or an experiential realization. Okay, so this is seeing a thing in its true nature. Okay, seeing a thing and this is where we want to get a direct perception of emptiness. So this is the significance of that when they talk about right understanding. Okay, so again, we did a traditional meditation on emptiness. Okay, and I was asking if it's possible to get Kathleen McDonald's book, How to Meditate, and she again is one of our longest term nuns, Venerable Sangye Kadro, but the book again should be listed under Kathleen McDonald. I think Amazon has it, Wisdom Publications. Michael had put the link up before. How to Meditate is the book. She has a really approachable emptiness meditation there. I'm sure you can find some online. Just make sure it's an authentic emptiness meditation according to the 4-part analysis. So I was asking to please try to go through that again to gain some familiarity, and we will do it again in classes like that. Okay. And the other thing I asked you to do was look at the constant change and confusion that's often floating around your mind. Okay. So look at the constant change and confusion floating around your mind. And I was just wondering, stories, these couple of weeks, did you ever notice stories that you had going? Did anybody exercise this and ask yourself about the stories? Is that true? I do that. I do it all the time, frankly. You get a story going about somebody. This is something that, I'll put it this way, disturbs the balance of your mind. So you're either overly excited about something, right? Not seeing the picture clearly. But what happens more often is something's really disturbing us in a negative way. Thank you, Michael just put up the link again to the book. Thank you so much, Michael. So again, when something disturbs your mind, this is the way we need to work. If we're going to deal with these challenging things in the world that we mentioned, division and political violence, and look what's happening in Ukraine. Somebody starts talking about nuclear weapons. Seriously? Because of my ego, I think it'd be really better to just end the world, because one person is not happy. It's so sad, right? But what happens on let's just look at our immediate environment. Some of you have been cruising along the last couple of weeks. Anything difficult happen? You had a little misunderstanding with somebody? You just go out in the world and you see it. You just see people. I just see a couple people in the store the other day. I don't know what happened. A couple of guys walking down the aisle of one of the stores. What's the big deal? We're just getting groceries, anybody. You're just in there wanting to get your groceries. It is not a big deal. And somehow, I don't know what happened. One guy came a little too close to another guy. Maybe one of those people or both of them had a bad day. Right? This is simple. This is where war comes from. I'm not kidding you. This is where it comes from. This is a minor thing. They had a bad day. Okay? And somebody came a little bit too closer. They're standing in line a little too closely, and suddenly they're yelling at each other. And then that reverberation comes out to everybody in the store around them. And I see people also moving back, right? And then you hear about these shootings, and I see people suddenly like they don't know somebody's going to pull out a gun, or I mean, it's insane. It's not necessary. So again, can I when we talked last week about, I just want to bring this up again. I'm going to read this again. I brought you some Brené Brown quotes that I really like, okay? This was about the authenticity, the vulnerability. I have to poke at my stories. So somebody gets a little too close to me in the supermarket. Seriously, this has happened before, actually, this happened to me when Jeannie will appreciate this. When I was living in Springfield, this was more than a year ago, at my little local supermarket. And that first year of COVID, when we went out to the stores, everybody was afraid to be too close to anybody, and everybody was masked. And I'm in line checking out, and there's a woman who's like, she has to be right behind me. And I just didn't feel that comfortable. So I kept turning around. I kept kind of moving away from her. And then I tried to move out of the line to let her go. But she kept saying, no, you're in front of me. We're both masked. And she said, you're in front of me. And then she'd just be right up behind me, like almost touching me. Like it was like not normally where you'd even stand when we were normally standing in line. It was really, so I kept turning around, and there were markers on, remember we had markers on the floor, stand here, 6 feet. You've seen that in the stores. So I suddenly kind of looked back at her, and then I said, I think I pointed to the floor and I said, I think that the next marker is back there. But she couldn't see my smile, but I said it really kind of, very lightly. I said, I think there's a marker back there that, would you mind, just to step back a little bit, or I can step up, and then she got all bent out of shape. She got all upset, and she went into this whole tirade about, the governor of Pennsylvania, who is Democrat, and how she hates him. She went into this whole thing, and then I just said to her, and then I just calmed down, and I realized she was just freaked out. She was just not happy. So I didn't mean to contribute to her lack of happiness, but there's a way. And then I said to her, I'm so sorry. It sounds like you're having a really hard time. I'm so sorry. And I understand, that these things are really troubling, I said to her, aren't they? And I kind of went, aren't they? Like, we're in this together. And then she calmed down, so again, but had I been like, giving her the finger, like these guys have been yelling at her, like, hey, you're in my space, now you're yelling, then it escalates. So I think our job here is de-escalation. De-escalation as much as possible. Like, can we do that? Can we reach into it? How do we do it? And sometimes it's me admitting, like, I think I even turned to her and I said, I'm kind of scared now too, or I'm kind of really troubled by what's going on too. I hear you. That's a lot. Like, like I'm right there with you. It's not like I'm better than you and like you shouldn't be thinking about that and being in my face. It's like the guy when I mentioned last week, it's the father that says to his son, this is the authenticity. This is being, facing yourself and your fears. This father that says to his son, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. Sometimes things are sad and it's okay. So there's this vulnerability that's okay, rather than posturing yourself, guys, don't cry. Can't cry. Got to be strong. That's a lot to bear. Especially men have to bear that one. That's a lot, I think. And women bear that too. So I think in that sense, let's poke our stories and look at, can I kind of, I realize this person's struggling. We're in situations. I don't know, anybody have any Anything going that went on in the last couple of weeks where they were poking that story and challenging their own story? You're challenging, I'm not fixing somebody else. This is not about fixing somebody else's mind. This is me when I get upset, angry, attached, jealous, prideful, depressed, okay, angry. Can you get curious about it? One of my favorite words these days. Get curious. Seriously. So anybody want to share anything?
I'll share. Where I live, there's often when I go out driving to the downtown, I see or am passed by this pickup truck, and it's covered with it's loaded with Trump flags. It must have 10 flagpoles, and it does nothing but drive around all day, every day. And it makes me angry. It makes me furious. And then I said, okay, that's not serving me. So lately I've been thinking about if I could have a conversation with that person, what would I say? And so I just have come up with questions like, are you being paid to do this? It must be really expensive to do this because I see him filling up the gas tank. It's like, why are you doing it? I'm just trying to figure out how could I have a conversation with this person that would be open.
Yes. So thank you, Peggy. And actually, I visited Peggy this year, and I think I saw that truck. I think I know the truck you mean. So, and I've seen those trucks in other areas. We've all seen those kind of trucks. Okay. Here's the thing: is I'll have to try to find. I'll try to find this link. I'm sure it's on the internet, and there's other things. When I was in Pennsylvania doing interfaith, I am often doing interfaith work or part of a group, interfaith. So different religions, different groups showing up. We had a really nice group in one of the counties there, and we had a thing about how during the election cycle, how do you dialogue with somebody that has really different beliefs than you in a really healthy, positive way? And it really gave you talking points because there's certain words that flag to the other side that will basically, have more of a charge than other words. Like words like liberal. When you say the word liberal to a progressive liberal person, they kind of see it as you're calling me a negative name to some degree. So there's other words to use. And the same thing with if you're using the word Trumper. Some people don't like that. They take offense. So could we just, and here's the other thing to explore, and this is something also from Brené Brown and I mentioned before, is when we're making somebody other, it's easy to kind of drive by the truck. You don't know them. You don't even know their names, I bet. And you drive by the truck and you see them and they're kind of out here. Okay. So all of these people, our job is, again, move in close. Meaning, can you get to know them? And that's just what Peggy's saying, is she's kind of curious. How does she start a dialogue? And one of the things I've mentioned to you before is where I was living in Pennsylvania, which is kind of a conservative area, but it's changing a little bit, that particular county. But again, on the street where I was living, it's a half street now. It used to be very conservative, and now it's half. So, and I'm close with several of those houses, and half of them, have a different view than mine politically. And yet I'm friends with these people, and I really like them, and I can dialogue with them about other things. So because we've gotten to know each other, we trust each other, and we're there for each other, in certain ways. But I will, see the signs that go up on their lawns for politics. I've seen Facebook posts of theirs that are, with a clip of, this news or that news, which has a certain maybe reactionary thing, just to see that they have a very different view, and yet we can find some common ground. And through the common ground, we can actually have some decent conversations because we trust each other, and I can listen to their views, which actually teaches me a little bit of some of the things they're concerned with and why they have those views. And some of it, honestly, I can understand. I'm not going to say I'm going to support that view, but they listen to some of my views now. From my, it's not that they need to change, but there's a peaceful way to dialogue. So I would say, look for some of there are, talking points that you can engage a little bit. And it is kind of like, instead of just seeing them through the truck, there's a whole person there that's probably got some things in common with you. So that's an interesting one. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to explore. Because again, the first word we worked on in July was division, if you remember. Then we talked about violence and countering violence. We first have to counter it in our mind. So as soon as you drive by that kind of truck, for some of you, not all of you maybe, but you drive by the truck, you're held hostage here where the heart closes up. And you immediately is like, I have a whole judgment about these people, but you don't even know them. You don't even, so I don't, like Peggy was saying, I don't really need that in my space, in my mind. So I'm going to work on dismantling that in my mind to have a spacious thing, with everybody. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be best friends with everybody and hang out with them, but it's at least from my side, I'm, having a little bit more spacious view. It keeps this peaceful. That's the peaceful ripples that go out. So then I'm in the supermarket, you get too close to me, but I'm going with the flow. I'm rolling. And we all know people that somebody bumps up against them. It's no problem. Somebody dings your car. Hey, it's okay. Where some people are so rigid. So how do we loosen the rigidity is what we're talking about. That's what emptiness can do. Okay. Coupled with loving kindness, of course, coupled with the other wing of the bird, bodhicitta, that enlightened attitude of wanting to become a Buddha. Why? To benefit all living beings, to cultivate compassion, empathy, loving kindness, like that. So I'm going to go on a bit with what I wanted to talk about tonight. And one thing I'd asked you to do when I said curiosity, and one thing I just wanted to mention in the chant that we heard in the beginning. So it does talk at the very end, gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi soha. Okay, so that is the perfection of wisdom mantra. In a sense, we say it often at the beginning of teachings like that. Sanskrit about, beyond, gone completely beyond. It's talking about the different levels of the different scopes of our practices. To the paths to enlightenment is what it represents. 5 paths to Buddhahood is what gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi soha is what it's saying. These paths are, number 1, the path of accumulation. Number 2, path of preparation. I'm going to explain more about these, the path of preparation. Number 3, the path of seeing. Number 4, path of meditation. And number 5, the path of no more learning. So the path of accumulation is where you are practicing a lot to accumulate the conditions you need to see emptiness directly. It's all geared around emptiness. Okay, you're accumulating the conditions. You're doing a lot of practices in meditation in general. Maybe you're serving your teacher. A lot of service to beings. Maybe you're working at a center, happily working at a center, helping for years, or running a center, engaged in some Buddhist, in some long-term study program. There's all kinds of different things that you can do like that. Maybe a monastic, if you're keeping your vows well, maybe as a layperson having more vows that you're keeping well. These are all different paths. If you're doing it well, it's accumulating the conditions, okay? And maybe along the line, you're doing purification practices to clean up the mistakes we make, which are just normal for humans, okay? Path of accumulation. Path of preparation, you are preparing to see emptiness directly. So you're deepening your meditation on emptiness. You've now probably got a pretty good intellectual understanding of emptiness. Okay. You are, again, more and more longer meditations on emptiness. And again, continuing all the accumulating patterns and purifying patterns. And they say, actually, you don't really get on the first path. You don't really get on the first path of accumulation, until you have renunciation. So meaning, until I'm really striving day and night to get out of samsara, I'm not really on that path of accumulation. I may be getting ready and preparing and accumulating some good conditions, purifying things, but you're not technically on that path. And then they say the path of preparation, you come onto that path when you've gotten a high level of meditative absorption, like that. So the mind, more and more meditations. Okay, the path of seeing, and those two paths can take a long time. I don't have a specific amount of eons or years or whatever. The path of seeing, number 3, is when you see emptiness directly. You see emptiness directly, meaning, so you're in meditation when it happens, and through all the accumulation of merit of good conditions, meditating on emptiness, normally through that 4-part analysis, and you come to the absence. You do not find the I that you feel, that object of refutation or negation, and you stay there with the meditative absorption, focused penetratively on that, okay? Till something switches in your mind and you get emptiness directly. You come out of it. It's a very short path. You come out of that meditation, okay? So the thing is, now you know, capital K, K-N-O-W. Now you know, you've seen emptiness directly, okay? But what happens is, everything you experience still in the world goes back to the way it was, because that's what your mind's habituated with. However, now you know, meaning if you see things, and you also, from that moment of seeing emptiness directly, you have many other realizations that come. Many realizations come. So I may look at the cup again, okay, and see, but now I see it somewhat differently. But I still see a concrete cup there, like that. But now I understand that there is no concrete cup there at all. You have a deeper understanding of the 4 Noble Truths, the first teaching the Buddha gave, and all these realizations come at that point. Okay. Then what you do is you're moving into the path of meditation. Okay. And what you're doing is you're spending more and more time in formal meditation on emptiness based on what you saw. So you're more quickly can go back into that space, that absence. You have the meditative absorption to keep your mind focused there, okay? To start to really totally familiarize your mind with what you saw directly in the meditation. More and more absorbing your mind in that experience, soaking your mind in that, okay? So that when you come out more and more, eventually automatically it will take over and you start to see the world through what's called the 2 truths. 2 truths, okay? A conventional reality, here's a cup. There is a cup here. We all understand when I say cup, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a convention, there's an agreement, okay? And yet on an ultimate reality, I know the cup, there's no concrete existing cup there at all. Okay? There is a configuration of a metal object that has a bottom that has an opening in the top that can hold liquid. And I understand, but I see it directly from ultimate reality, emptiness, it's emptiness, and a conventional reality. And as I then remove, continuing on that path of meditation, more and more of the subtle obscurations to omniscience, I reach the path of no more learning and can become, and then removing those subtle obscurations there, can become a Buddha. So gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisoha is all contained in those 5 paths. That's what it's talking about, are those 5 paths in that mantra. And then on a funny note, some years ago, when I was running another center, we decided, a staff member had an idea to raise money, and we decided what were we going to put it towards, and we selected a farm animal sanctuary in Utah, and we researched the whole thing. We found out it was very legitimate. And we looked at all the animals they had, and they had a thing about how much it would cost for the life of a horse or the life of a goat. So we decided to save one goat. It was like $800. And for the life of the goat, all the food, all the medical care for its life. And we got to name the goat. So they sent us a picture and they sent us all this information, and they said, we'll try to say the name of the goat. So we named the goat Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. And we sent it off, and we said to them, we pronounced it for them, and we wrote it in phonetics, and we said, would it be possible if someone's feeding the goat once in a while to try to say this to the goat? We said, we know it's a long name, but can you, so we kind of lobbed that mantra onto it. And we all kind of got a kick out of that. And we got different reports about the goat over the years. And yeah, it was very sweet. So I think it's, so I continue to say, again, more and more, it's really helpful to get curious about your delusions as they arise. Get curious. It's not about changing other people. Can I start to look at my mind, and we're all looking at our minds more and more, to get curious when I'm not balanced. That's our Dharma practice. That's the spiritual path, is again and again, we get imbalanced many times during the day or during the week. So in the last 2 weeks, there's probably some, Peggy drives by the truck and then there's a little moment of like, ping, I'm not happy. Why do people have to think that way? Well, people are going to keep thinking that way. And there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not interested in that. There's nothing I can do about it. It's me fixing my mind. Okay. Where I'll drive by them and it doesn't even faze me. Lama Zopa Rinpoche in that space. His Holiness the Dalai Lama in that space. Or other highly realized beings that may not even be Buddhist. Okay, so less disturbance there gives me more space to help beings that are suffering. And there's a lot of them. So I don't need to be mired in other people's things. Right. So, and this is just the way of the world. So I like to get curious when I'm off balance and go, what's going on? What just happened? What just happened? So let's look at, well, then what do I do with that information? And part of it I mentioned was to please get some kind of meditation practice going. I know it takes effort. Some of you are doing that. Some sort of space to be still with ourselves once in a while. I do it every day. It's essential for me just to be still with ourselves. Okay. So let me talk a little bit more about, and this is the biggest thing, and I'll say this again and again, is what I'm just noticing so much, is choosing love over fear. Choosing love over fear. And it sounds kind of cliched, but this is the whole thing, is, can I get curious to notice, oh, I'm afraid right now. I'm afraid right now. I mentioned, some of you are aware, so a year ago, it's been a year now, that I traverse the country to stay in California right now, at Land of Medicine Buddha. I've been here. And again, due to the pandemic, a lot of centers are struggling, not just Buddhist, businesses have closed. You get what's going on. So when I came here, it was we were approaching winter, late September, and I moved to the center the end of January, right in the middle of winter. It was dripping. It's in a redwood forest. It was very dark, cold. The little cabin, which is quite delightful where I live, but it's not insulated in the least. So it's just like a leaking sieve in the winter. It's cold. It's heated, but it's quite cold, and different things. And the community was very fragmented, and the community was honestly a little bit traumatized. And basically because they're just coming out of the pandemic, and people tried to come and help, and it was very hard to figure out how to run a large property, how to pay for it, things like that. So it's just standard stuff I think a lot of people were going through. And how do we do this? And we had to close the center for a time. And so you close the center, that means people aren't coming. That means money's not coming to support the center. And this place is really expensive. Then you're in California. There's forest fires. There's fires. And so fire insurance was canceled for most of the residential centers, residential places, Buddhist or not, throughout California. I know many centers I've talked to. Fire insurance canceled. Can you imagine? And those that we're getting a state plan. So we've been working it through the state because they had to jump in. One center went private with another company, and their insurance used to be, they were paying $40,000 a year for quite a large center that, like that. And now their quote that they're paying is $300,000 a year. So you get the idea. It's staggering. Okay. So what happens is people get afraid. People get fearful. I could see people here operating from this level of distrust. It's not really what a Buddhist center is about necessarily, like that, but based on just all the surrounding environment. A lot of homeless people, they got much worse over the pandemic in this area. I came from Pennsylvania, less homeless people, because you can't really live well outside in the winter. Too cold, but go to California. If you're a homeless person, I'd live in California. Milder weather. You can live outside. You can. So as a result of that, more break-ins because people don't have, and so there's a little bit. So it's normal. It's normal. You do the best you can. But I noticed that myself I got a little rattled, and I was also the new person here. So even though I've had a history in California, know a lot of people, I really didn't know the system here. And at times I've felt myself falling in to the trench of fear. Like it's a very different experience than my little pandemic bubble where I knew all the neighbors, it was safe. My brother was nearby, I had other family members, to fall into this trench of fear. And then as soon as I come back, here's tool number one is bodhicitta. As soon as I come back about, I became a nun, and not just because I became a nun, but I'm really interested in helping beings as much as possible. I think most of you are. I don't think we're any different that way. You don't need to be a nun to help people, right? So I'm really interested in that. And as soon as I come back to that motivation I set every morning, I come back to that and reestablish it through the day when I can. And I could get in touch through my sitting practice with, oh, that's fear. Like, what just happened back there with this person? Or what were you thinking about? Oh, it's actually, I'm going to label it fear. That is fear. So what's the antidote is love, and then I'd realize, like, when I really look at these different people I was working with, you can see negative things about almost anybody if you choose, but that's not very fun. So what part of my job was like, there's so many positive things about all these people. But when people become fearful and mistrustful, it can bring out the worst in them. That's not who they totally are. So my thing was just see these other parts of them and know that everybody needs and deserves love. So once I came back to that motivation again, this is about, I really want to do the work on my mind. It's all I can do. But why do I want to do it and get to this place? So I can really help people unlimitedly and not be stuck in my own stuff. Okay. But right now I am limited and I'm stuck in my own stuff, but I'm doing the best I can. But as soon as I turn that motivation about others, the fear would dissolve. Fear many times went away and I went, I'm doing the best I can. And, if you want to look at what's the worst thing that can happen, there's some negative things, but if I just stay with love, well, that's the best place to be. If we have an earthquake and the building falls down on my head, I hope I'm thinking about love. That would be nice to go out like that. That's okay. Because stuff happens. Negative stuff happens, but a lot of negative stuff doesn't happen to people. So let's keep the balance, the orientation. Okay. So things about having faith in that, how do I keep my faith up, which isn't something that Westerners have a lot of automatic built-in faith. Okay. So, but my faith, in a sense, it kind of prompts me, choose love, choose kindness. That's what my faith, that's what, based on having met some teachers that I found pretty inspiring. You can just go through books you've read that you found really inspiring, written by people like that. It deepens my faith in the positive stuff about humanity. Okay. Because again, a Buddhist premise is, and here's the thing for you, Peggy, with your truck driver, your truck owners, is I do really more and more come back to the fundamental goodness of all beings. There is more evidence on the planet that kindness is going to prevail, even though you look at the war in Ukraine and you go, really? But sometimes in emergencies, and this is what's interesting is, I was in, some of you were there, the 89 earthquake in San Francisco, if some of you remember. Peggy was probably part of that, or Joanne was nodding her head, Nancy maybe. So what I notice is, why does it take an emergency for people to be a little bit more kinder, a little kinder to others? And I noticed, the one thing I notice about that is people got a shock, depending where you were at the time or what kind of building you were in, or people had a bit of this shock where if you're in that vicinity closely, there was a lot of actually damage to Land of Medicine Buddha at the time, but I was in San Francisco and there was damage. And so that the shock, and then somehow everybody's really willing to help each other. I remember at our magazine where I was working, everybody's like, oh, can I get your bag? Why does it take that? But it shows me the fundamental goodness that people, that's what in an emergency, people will turn up there. like that. Now, I know there's signs where people are rushing out of a building to get out first, 9/11 and but there were extraordinary acts of kindness in 9/11 when the buildings got bombed, got attacked. You could read about extraordinary levels of kindness people were willing to go through. Just the people, the first responders running back into the building, trying to go in to save people, blew me away like that. So there's many of those acts. They don't tend to be promoted in public media. So for me, I limit my access to public media, what I'm watching about the news, and because it just tends to tell you all the negative stuff going on. Right? So you don't need to give it. That's part of me propping my mind up in a positive way with bodhicitta. I don't need to subject my mind again and again and again to negative, negative, negative. I know Putin is a practice for many people. There's always somebody who's a practice. There's always somebody, and it's all relative. Okay. But the thing is, he might just be more confused than some other people. Again, more veils of obscuration over his really true seed of goodness, that Buddha nature, we would call it in Buddhism, that's there. Okay. And I'd like to see that in everybody, to think that that is there in all beings, and I've seen that. I could talk about my Trump neighbors in Pennsylvania. They'd do anything for me. If I had an emergency and called them, they'd be there in a second. I have no question about it. If they're home and I put out a thing or I scream or something that I need help, they'll be there in a second. I don't have any question. They've helped me with many things, the house, not emergencies, but like that. And I would do the same thing for them. So that's a possibility that, that guy Peggy down the street, you never know what my man or woman it could be, but could help you with something at some point where suddenly you realize you're on the same side of something else comes up in the neighborhood. It's really interesting. Okay, a little bit more I wanted to go through is so think about if you can this particular week, choosing love over fear. What kind of example do you have? What is coming up, and can you kind of look at that person, or now it doesn't mean that you don't protect yourself if you need to and get out of the way of something, but it's just more of an attitude. Okay. So picking, practicing love over fear. Okay. And because here's a way that I can let go of self-cherishing, by choosing love over fear. It's a bigger, expansive place of the heart. I'm not so involved of what I need. We get into what I need. I need that woman to step back. She's too close to me. I need that. Okay. But then, just kind of interacting with her, turning around, interacting and asking her to step back, and then seeing all of her anxiety, and then suddenly connection. Wow, I'm also anxious. I said to her, I'm also struggling, and suddenly there's connection. And then she heard that, and it's always hard with masks on. Can't really see the whole face, but somehow we found a way to connect. I said, wow, I'm so sorry that you're having, and then we could, even though she did move back, and she realized she was too close. I think she realized. So again, notice that choosing love interrupts self-cherishing mind, which is a problem. Self-cherishing mind. This isn't about self-care. Self-care is healthy. I'm talking about selfishness, self-absorption. Okay. So rather than having a mindset, here's another part. Rather than having a mindset, okay, that's consumed, all my decisions are consumed with what people will think. With what people will think about me. That's really leaden and tiring. Constantly moving through, what are they going to think? What are they going to think? How about I'm good enough? How about that mindset? I'm good enough. I am good enough. And I'm giving it my best shot. Like that. Think about the different mindset of that. I am good enough. So that's a good kind of affirmation to move through the couple of weeks like that. Okay. So let me talk about some sinkholes we land in. Sinkholes, things that trip us up, things that trip. This is how you get drained emotionally. This is how you get drained emotionally in this, okay? Living in the future. And I'd even say living in the past or future. Living in the past or future. What about just right now? Like right now, can I just own like, oh, I'm a little scared right now. Like the other night, I heard these, I don't know, they sounded like gunshots. I don't know what they were. I think 3 of them over the course of like 20 minutes. I didn't know, here I am. And then you can stay with the fear and live with, well, what could be, what if, but there I was in the present and I went, I'm doing what my teacher wants me to do, giving it my best shot. If somebody has to come in here and shoot me, well, that's the car. It won't be that I won't try to get out of the way and stop them and whatever. I'm certainly going to participate practically. But if that's what my karma does dictate and that's going to unfold, I'd rather be thinking about others, how I'm going to help others. I'd rather do Tonglen meditation and stay there thinking that I can take this from all the people that might be shot in the world. Let me just take on that anxiety and all their families suffering and all that, and let me just give them all the peace and safety I've ever felt, like that. And I can just, in that moment, die. Okay, that's the best I can do. That's great. It's not a bad thought to go down with. Okay, so there's always a way to shift it a little bit. Here's another problem, another stumbling block. Okay, is very, very short-term thinking. Very short-term thinking. So even though I might be in the present moment, right? But there's a bigger perspective too. There's a bigger perspective. Are you lost in the weeds? Are you lost in the weeds, just focusing on this little blade of grass that you're so focused on? Why does she do this? Look at his truck. Look at the flags on his truck. How come he has that? How come he has a... There's a whole other thing of all these other people that, and I'm just picking on Peggy, that have similar thoughts that you have. Isn't that great? But you've got other friends in that community that, like that. And here's another one is, how often do you want to win? It also comes up to the guy in the truck, or we have better views, or this election or that election or this. How often do you just want to win at many things? Like, I was right, and sometimes it's tiring being right all the time. Then you're alone. We don't kind of share and compromise with things. Then we can build community in that space. I think it's boring if everybody frankly thinks the way I do. I think it'd be a really boring planet. So I learn things from other people. I get stretched by other people, even when they disagree with me and think differently than me. So think about this couple weeks. When is it important that I win this? I win this argument. I win this point. I get them to move the truck. I get him to move away. I get the office by the such and such. I get to show my boss that I did this. This was my idea, not her idea. How often does that come up for you, blocking my access to love like that? And then here's another one. How often do you get stuck in being defensive? I had a couple examples this week I was just thinking of where I think being so rattled coming here, there were some pretty deep problems when I got here, and just kind of what was being asked of me, which was really different than the reason I came out here. So there was I was a little bit kind of in a rattled space, I think, and I wasn't even living here at the time. And so I was commuting over and just all of that, going on with. So there were times I felt really defensive, like having to kind of stick up for myself and things, like being seen, being misinterpreted a lot is something that just goes on for me in general. And I think people see me as super strong, and there's a real sensitive side I have. And so they didn't want to kind of acknowledge that, because I think sometimes it freaks people out. I had a thing sometimes with very close girlfriends where one time when I admitted I was afraid, this is years ago, we were at a party and there were a lot of drugs there. And somehow getting wind of this, we were in our late 20s, and somehow I was kind of, as I was kind of walking through this house and seeing what was going on, a party they wanted to go to, walking through this house and just looking at the amount of drugs that was there, I was just like, I don't want to be in this space. This is not a party I want to be at. This is, I don't know what's going on here, but, and so somehow when I expressed that, they kind of freaked out, and that wasn't okay. And they started kind of verbally attacking me. Like, what do you mean? This is, you're, and then I went, whoa, because they just, I think, saw some kind of invincible thing, and that's not my reality. That's not me. So you get these projections. So I found I was being defensive with people here. And then I went, what do I have to defend? If I go back to the motivation, I really want to help people. that's why I'm here. It's much brighter now in some ways. I mean, just because I've readjusted my thing. It's not we haven't fixed all of our problems. Not, far from it. We haven't fixed. But again, I can participate in a much more buoyant, energetic way, solving problems. Some problems now there seem to be, we're talking about these things so that in a better way, because I'm not kind of running and going like, well, let me explain. I'm just kind of like, I know I had a good motivation. So think about these traps you fall into again. Okay. And here's another one is, again, being authentic. And this was something in the Heart Sutra that I put on the screen, that the chant was led. There's a word that it talks about authentic and perfect enlightenment. It said authentic and perfect enlightenment. Okay. I'm focusing now on the authentic. And again, this is the father saying to the son, it's okay to be sad. Sometimes we get sad. And if you can say you're sad instead of acting out, pretending that you're not sad, and then presenting some negative aspect of yourself because you don't want to show that you're sad. So this is even something for yourself where, I say often that I made a mistake and that it doesn't feel good to make a mistake. I don't feel really good right now because I think I mucked up, right? Rather than I'm a failure. I'm not a failure. None of you are failures. And I had somebody recently that was writing me that they're a failure and all that, and I was like, I don't have that experience about you at all. Never had that thought. Okay, so it's very heavy, those thoughts. Check those thoughts, get curious again about them. Get curious, because otherwise with a failure, you're going to negatively act out. Tendency can be. And then I'm going to shut down or repress what's going on. Really the antithesis of self-care. Internalizing causes a lot of pain in the body and mind, like that. So again, it's kind of like, yeah, I might even say, well, there was something that came up recently here, and I just owned it. I just went, wow, I really made a big mistake with that. And it looked that it wasn't going to be resolved. And I kind of let it go and went, you guys, I really messed up. I really messed up. And it could be a kind of big mess up for LMB, for Land of Medicine Buddha, more on a kind of financial level. And then I looked at it, but my authenticity was, I can't, this is something, we can't do this, or whatever it was, like, we're not going to go there. We need to check up on this. And I went, and I'm sorry I didn't realize this earlier and clue in, and I really messed up. And then suddenly by just saying that, and I really meant it, but I wasn't going to be stuck in it. I just went, okay, so now I need to figure out, I'm going to do whatever I can do to salvage this. And then they were all like, oh no, you didn't mess up. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't, before I would have been running and they would have been like, it's all your fault. And I just went like this, and I don't really think it was my fault, but I'm going to rectify. And as a result now, it's all turning out really well. This one particular thing, it's all going to be fine. And I actually let it go and thought, we're not going to be able to get that money. It's not going to work out. Seems like it's working out amazingly quickly. So again, just being your authentic self of I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. I just did this thing. I'm so sorry. It really doesn't feel good. I'm really kind of spun by that, but I'll figure out what I need to do. But I'm not a failure. So don't layer the heavy thing on yourself. Okay. And then the other thing is, when you're tangling with somebody, what kind of, can I intersperse a generous mind? What's happened to the generosity of my mind in that space? Okay. And what might be the most generous assumption that I can make about this person? Peggy, your truck owner. Okay. Is there a generous assumption that I can intersperse rather than all the other judgments I've had? Can I think about their intentions in life in general, like that? So, because when I started dialoguing with my neighbors that support a different political view than me, and could see how people felt about their own, personal, more individual rights, which is what the United States is based on, by the way, for white people. Independence, right? Independence. Think about it. So there's cultural stuff, because I teach around the world and have engaged with different cultures. They're very different, the different cultures. So what I've noticed is, oh, you didn't get the sutra on the screen share. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'll see, maybe Michael can share that with you. So you didn't have it during the entire reading. Oh, that's too bad. It's funny. It looked like it was sharing. Sorry about that. So, what I was thinking about assumptions when so independence is what the states, as you know, was founded on. So, we are very independent people, and some people feel that, certain things have been inflicted upon us, or different views. And again, the first thing we mentioned, the issue we're having is division. So again, the more I can find a way to unify, which means creating healthy relationships with everybody and your truck owner, finding some way. I mean, there is something we have in common that we'll find with people. So as I get curious with my own things, to work on that. So I want to go back to more formal emptiness again. I want us to analyze again, talk about the 4-part analysis just in the 10 minutes before we close. Once again, we're going to look back at this pen. And I want to make sure everybody's with me and clearly, how do we analyze? How do we analyze? And just to keep soaking our minds in. Okay, this is a mundane object. You're pretty familiar with Bic pens. That's what this is. Okay, and what we do is we analyze based on how the pen exists. And and I want to get to the point of, why is this important? How does this help us with division and violence and all these things in our mind that keep us in balance? Is if we can understand, based on something mundane like this, the way the pen comes into existence, okay, is based on different levels of what we call dependent origination. Dependent origination. What does that mean? Is that the pen comes into existence based on other things. It's the only way it can exist. It's the only way it can exist. Really think about it. It's the only way it can exist. Number one, the first level, is it comes into existence based on something I'll call causes and conditions. Causes and conditions. This is about emptiness, okay? What that means is, causes and conditions for this pen to come to us were that people in ancient days started recording history on rock walls with substances, minerals that came from the earth, and plants and things like that, okay? So they started recording things, and they fast forward to ink wells, and they invented ink, and they got some kind of thing you could dip in, and it got more sophisticated to the point where plastic was invented. Somebody created a factory, said, I'm going to mass produce pens and sell them, make some money. That's how this pen got here. That's causes and conditions of the pen. Everybody with me? Okay. Second theory of dependent origination, and each one gets a little bit more subtle, is the pen exists based on its parts. Based on its parts. Well, of course, that makes sense. It has to be based on its parts, and these are the parts of the pen. It's got sides. I'll call this the side. This is another side. It's got a plastic tube. It's got ink inside. It's got an ink cartridge. It's got a cap. I might even call this, this is arbitrary, but the top of the pen, bottom of the pen, it's got this little plastic thing in here, metal thing here. You get the idea? Okay? These are the parts of the pen. So sometimes you're analyzing, okay, through dependent arising. This is a little bit different than emptiness, but they go together. Through dependent origination or dependent arising, how the pen exists. And you go, if I take this off, is this pen? No. This is the cap of the pen. This is not pen. And this doesn't write anyway. Okay. If I take the metal thing off and just show you that, is that pen? Nope. Okay. If I give you the plastic tube alone and hold that up, is that pen? No. Okay. If I take the ink cartridge out and hold that up, is that pen? Buddhism say, I can't find the pen. It's an ink cartridge. It's something different. If I take the ink out, that's not pen. This little plastic thing here is not pen. So those are technically the parts of the pen. And so now listen very carefully. We didn't find pen, and I know I'm going through this a little bit more quickly. We didn't find pen in any of the parts of the pen. Let me just bring everybody on screen here. Okay. We didn't find pen in any of the parts of the pen. Okay. So you can't put the parts together. The parts that do not contain pen, you can't put them together and say there's a pen there. Okay. But that's what our mind does. Our mind puts all the parts together. And then what happens? There's a gap. And then the mind labels on what I'm going to call, when you put the parts together, you get a valid basis of designation. You get a valid basis of designation. Okay. And in this case, I'm going to call that valid basis of designation. So just listen carefully. A cylindrical plastic tube filled with ink that writes. That's a valid basis of designation. A plastic cylindrical tube filled with ink that writes. Okay. My mind, as a human being in this part of the world, takes in that information. Okay. And it misses the gap of the labeling process. Why? Because of fundamental ignorance. Meaning I don't have a direct perception of emptiness. And I've had that lack of a direct perception of emptiness in my mind since beginningless time. There's no beginning to my mind, according to Buddhism. So that ignorance stays there. And what it does is it imputes, first of all, there's a gap. My mind labels pen, okay, on the plastic cylindrical tube filled with ink that writes. A pen appears to my consciousness, okay, but not a merely labeled pen. Not a merely labeled pen. What appears to an ignorant consciousness is a concrete pen there. Concretely existing pen that doesn't depend on causes and conditions, that doesn't depend on its parts. The third, most subtle dependent arising is the pen exists, if you're ready for this, as a mere imputation, as a mere label, is how the pen exists, according to the highest school of Tibetan Buddhism. Most subtle dependent arising, the pen exists merely imputed as a mere label. That's hard for the mind to conceive. But here's where the problem starts. First of all, I misconceive of how the pen exists. Okay, here's the real problem then. This is what really makes us suffer. Okay, and pen is pretty mundane, but what appears, there's a labeling process, plastic cylindrical tube filled with ink that writes. I want you to keep thinking about this 2 weeks. Okay, plastic cylindrical tube filled with ink that writes. There's a gap of a labeling. My mind then labels on it pen. Pen comes into existence. What appears to an ignorant consciousness is a solidly existing, concretely existing pen for all time. And then I grasp onto it and say, mine. That's where all your suffering starts. My pen. Okay. Again, pen is mundane. What about my kid, my car, my dog, my cat, me? You threaten this, I'm going to blast you. There's Putin. This is what he's doing. Really, really confused. Really, really obscured from the real view of what's happening. Okay? But we're all obscured and we suffer as soon as it's my cup. Don't you dare take my cup, my phone. What you see people when they lose their phone, oh my God, my phone, my phone. We have it all the time, mostly with ourselves. So the more you can deflect a little bit, how do I exist? Or I heard a gunshot. I wasn't really scared, but I had a little bit like, oh, what's that? You know, this is the United States of America, so people own guns and they use them, right? A little too readily for me, okay. But there was a little, and that's when you want to catch that eye. Best experience is a little bit of fear, great deal of anger, great deal of fear, all of those things, the eye comes out. That's your object of negation in the 4-part emptiness meditation. So you want to use those moments of, there's the eye. That look how strong it is. Look how independent it seems. That sense of self is what I mean, the eye. Look, Look how strong. Now what happens is it interferes, because there I am in line at the supermarket. Somebody gets too close to me and I'm going, hey. Now I was also afraid of infection. I'm going to spread it to somebody else. That was going on as well. But still, there's a little bit of, hey, you're too close to me. Okay. But then, and then I noticed that in line and I went, well, let me just take it down a couple notches. Like, I don't want to say anything. You know, you notice your mind, just get curious. Okay, well, she's too close. And then I was able to turn around in a very gentle voice and explain to her, please, I think the next marker's there. And then she kind of went off on me. And then I suddenly was like, keeping my voice very calm. It's okay. We're all in this together. I have some karma to have this little exchange with this woman, but I can try to make it as pleasant as possible. And slowly she kind of calmed down, and especially me saying, well, I understand, I'm anxious as well. It's really pretty sad right now, isn't it? Like, I hear what you're saying. It's really, really hard time for people, isn't it? And then so again, or I could have been like, hey, get back. You're too close to me. You're too close to me. Get back there. Why are you standing like this? I don't want to hear what you have to say. That's what happens. And that's where you get so this is our job. Okay. This is our job. Everybody okay? Questions? One thing I just wanted to mention, I just noticed somebody, what we're trying to do is, when you do come to classes, if it's possible, and I know we're really comfortable in Zoom, but you want to try to at least feel like you're attending at the meditation thing. So, try not to be lying down in bed, or, unless you're ill, unless you're ill and your back is hurting and things, you want to try to be as if you're attending a thing. It's just good for I think for yourself, attending classes and things like that. So, but any questions, please? Okay, everybody okay? So 2 weeks, the next time we meet, and please do register and check your spam again to make sure that you get the link. We're going to be meeting on October 10th is our next class. October 10th. What I'd love you to do in the time is, again, see if you can get how to meditate, look at the emptiness meditation, continue to try to do it. Ask me any questions when we come back. Get curious when your mind is off balance. What's it telling you? There's messages there for you. Instead of getting down on yourself, is what I'm saying. Instead of like, I shouldn't be angry, I'm a Buddhist. I shouldn't be there's no shoulds in the room. Just get curious. You have a judgment about the neighbor's truck. Well, and I like what Peggy said, where she went, well, I need to kind of deal with this. In her own mind, she means. Great practice. I want to look at that. Look at that stuff, how I'm making them other. And so, and what fear is coming up at times that pushes love out of the way? How can I have a more loving experience of this person? There are times you're in traffic and somebody's driving like a jerk, and I've just superimposed my mother on the person, or somebody I really like. I thought, hey, I could say, what if Joanne was driving? What if Peggy was driving? Like, oh, I'd certainly have a lot more space for them in the thing. So sometimes we can just do exercises like that. Where do you need to insert, I'm good enough right now? I'm good enough. When am I getting toppled by the quagmires I mentioned, where I'm living in the past and future? Like, I've just missed this present moment. Like, what? And when can I keep inserting bodhicitta? I want to bend, like, thinking about others before ourselves. When am I just focused on, I want to win. I'm going to win this argument. Or when am I being defensive? Look at those different things where you get drained emotionally, like that. And I just want to go back 1 second to, how would this relate to I'm just thinking of, these are the lists that we gave: violence, politics, terrorism, guns. I want to choose social awkwardness. So social awkwardness, I find, is coming up for a lot of people. People are coming out, meeting other people, but they get really tired after doing it if you haven't done it in a while. Some people are nervous, health-wise. If they haven't gotten COVID, they don't want to get it. They notice this person isn't masked. This person's been with these people. Maybe you're starting to go back in a work setting, meeting, or you're just out meeting, or you're the first place you're there having lunch inside. I know some people that have not been in a restaurant eating inside at all in like 2.5 years or so. And so absolutely, there's no problem. It's just, when do you notice social awkwardness, which you might feel from yourself? You might be feeling it from others. How can I, again, look at the love and fear thing? Look at, am I being defensive, or can I just remain authentic? Why? Because I care about them and I'm thinking about them right now. And I've been working a little bit on emptiness, so I'm deflecting the very solid experience I'm having about myself. I'm realizing we're all interdependent here. I rely on them for a happy, pleasant experience. They're relying on me. How can I make this most pleasant, yet remain authentic of my truth? Like me having to say to the woman, I'm not comfortable with her being right behind me. And I just had to say that, but I can say it in a nice way. We're going to stop there. I hope this is helpful. So we will do formal emptiness meditation next time again. We're going to go through that slowly again. We're going to keep working on that. And so bring any questions you have. I'd like to dedicate whatever positive energy we've created from our time. Can we dedicate it to our taking the time to get curious with some negative tendencies that show up in our mind, but to do it in a gentle way, okay? To do it in a very gentle way, a loving way with ourselves, then we're loving with others. You know, can we help to move it along our path of whatever we're getting curious about, to apply some of the antidotes and help us to get enlightened quickly so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings. I'd also like to dedicate for the war in Ukraine and all other places like that to end immediately. And for those who are ill, who need additional healing, can they receive that healing completely right away as well? Thank you so much. And I look forward. So do register again, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, if not sooner. And if you're interested in some meditation, Saturday mornings at 9, I am doing that. And oh, sorry, Angelina was writing. Yes, you have a bad back pain. Then obviously no problem at all. Yeah, we did cover a bit of ground, so I'm glad that you're enjoying like that. So again, do what you need to do to be comfortable. And I just didn't know, so I sometimes say, because some people see people. There was a woman, it was so cute. So she would show up at a class every night. It was a newer class. This is over a year ago, and she just, it was her time to have dinner right at the beginning of the class. They'd have her meal out. She'd just be eating away, and it's really not appropriate with teachings, because if we're in a meditation hall. So I kind of, the center didn't say anything, and I had to say something, and then and that was it. She just stopped. She didn't know, and so sometimes I don't know, because other people say, oh well, I see other people eating, so I'll eat, like that. So it's kind of funny how we've gotten into these habits with Zoom. So anyway, better you come and be as comfortable in whatever way works for you, like that. Thank you all so much for coming, and I really look forward to seeing you soon. Please be well.
Night, Amy. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.